going to get started. It's 12:30. So welcome to our second day of the Duke Journal of Gender Law and Policy Symposium, Intersectionality and Black Lives Matter. Yesterday we talked about Black women and girls in the movement. Today we're talking about Black lives in prison. Tomorrow we'll have a panel on Black lives in school, an education panel, and then on Thursday we'll have a Black LGBTQI panel. So before we get into our conversation, I'll just introduce our panelists. And if the structure is the same as yesterday, we'll have the panelists in discussion. Our moderator asks them questions, they'll talk among themselves, and for the last half, we'll invite you in. We'll really try this time to leave more time for discussion from the audience. The panel will be recorded, so you can find that later, but the question portion won't be recorded, so you should feel comfortable asking whatever you want to ask. It's kind of a safe space, I guess. Okay, so today's moderator is Professor Theresa Newman. Professor Newman is a clinical professor of law, co-director of the Wrongful Convictions Clinic, associate director of the Duke Law School Center for Criminal Justice and Professional Responsibility, and faculty advisor to the student-led Innocence Project. She has been at Duke since 1990 and served as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs from 1999 to 2008. Professor Newman is a member of the board of the International Innocence Network, an affiliation of more than 65 organizations dedicated to providing pro bono legal and investigative services to individuals seeking to prove their innocence and working to redress the cause of wrongful convictions. She was the network's former president. She has also served as president of the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence, a nonprofit organization she helped found, which is dedicated to assisting wrongfully convicted North Carolina inmates to obtain relief. Umar Muhammad. So Umar Muhammad is a community organizer with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. His current responsibilities include identifying people in the communities the coalition serves who have criminal records, histories, and connecting them with the center's attorneys. The attorneys then attempt to obtain court-based remedies such as expunsions and certificates of relief when possible. Umar organizes community-based groups and attends and speaks at forums, community meetings, and local government meetings to stay connected with the communities he serves. And last, but certainly not least, Professor Jim Coleman. Professor Jim Coleman is the John S. Broadway Professor of Practice of Law, Director of the Center for Criminal Justice and Professional Responsibility, and co-director of the Wrongful Convictions Clinic at Duke Law School. Professor Coleman joined the Duke faculty full-time in 1996, where he's been teaching responsibilities including criminal law, wrongful convictions, and appellate litigation. His academic work conducted through the Center for Criminal Justice and Professional Responsibility centers on the legal, political, and scientific causes of wrongful convictions and how they can be prevented. So let's get started with our panelists.
Thank you very much. I'm just thrilled to see everyone here. This is such a great room for a discussion like this. It's large, but yet intimate. But I want to start off by thanking the Duke Journal of Gender Law and Policy for hosting this truly important and ambitious series of talks. And in particular, I want to thank Glenda DeVille, who has worked with me and the other panelists today, and I think other panelists throughout the week, in putting this on. So Glenda, thank you for this, and I think we'll get started. So, when we first were invited, I'm just the moderator, but I'll reveal my uncertainty about what this was going to look like. So when we were first invited, we were told it was, Black Lives Matter in prison. And what does that mean? And then when I reflected on it, I thought, what a great panel, what a great opportunity to have both a lawyer in a community, a lawyer who works to get people out of prison, and we certainly, he and I together, see the aftermath of what that's like, and then to have a community organizer who spends his days thinking about how to mitigate the effects of, the after effects, the lingering effects of imprisonment. So I think this is a great chance to hear sort of across that spectrum. So to start, I think, to extend what I've just said, it would be helpful, I think, and I'm sure you thought about it because you've had this question for a little while at least. Could you describe the nature of your work and how you believe it fits into the current Black Lives Matter narrative?
Right.
And Umar first.
So, for me, it's the fact that that's my lived experience. So I'm formerly incarcerated. I spent a lot of my childhood in different systems. And I had no idea the beast that communities of color were fighting. My mother didn't know there was a school-to-prison pipeline. She just understood she had a black boy. And she wanted him to man up and also make a home safe. So for me, this topic is one, my lived experience, and then it's to the point where I'm watching my community and watching the cycle with my community. I honestly feel like this is the only thing that I could be doing right now. And I feel like my story is a little bit different, the way I was found, the way I came into this work. So, for me, I don't rap, not a ball player. I felt like this is my way out of the lifestyle, and I can be myself doing it. So,
Well, I don't rap either. So. I try to sing, but I can't sing. So. The work that we do in wrongful convictions, it's not by choice that most of our clients are African American. It's a fact of life in the prison system, and so if most of the people going into prison are black men, then it means that it's likely that most of the people who are being wrongfully convicted are black men. And that certainly, in terms of the cases that we have reviewed and that we have undertaken to investigate, they are predominantly African American men. I think it doesn't take a lot of time in the criminal justice system, any aspect of it, to realize that Black Lives Matter, although I think, and I've said this in other contexts, I think it's really a question, not so much a emphatic statement in the criminal justice system. It's Black Lives Matter ? Because I don't think that you can look at what happens in prisons and what happens when people get out of prison and what happens to the young men who end up in prison and think that anybody really cares about them. I think what characterizes the criminal justice system in terms of what we see of it is indifference on the part of most of the people who are responsible for the system. So that's sort of the context in which I thought about some of these issues.
So, Umar, if you could give us a sense of the scope of the problem post-release, how many, if you know, how large is this problem? What kinds of issues do people face when they get out? And maybe to allow you more time to think about that, I'd also want to return to something you said, that how you got involved in this work is a little different story, but you didn't tell us the story. So if you feel comfortable telling us that story, and I'd like to hear it, but then also give us a sense of the scope of the problem and the work you're doing.
Right. So, September 6, 2012, I was released after doing a 5.5-year bid. During my prison bid, I took classes. I passed the classes, certificates, the work-ready courses, teach you how to do the resume. But when I came home, even with all these certificates and turning in resumes, there was still no work. And because of past criminal charges, I couldn't get financial aid for school. So even when I tried to go to school, I couldn't get the financial aid for my classes because I got intent to sell charges. So the story, to not make it sound so long, during this incarceration bid, one, I'm surviving, right? I'm surviving. I was in closed custody the majority of my time, which is your maximum level security. And I didn't feel prepared for the world when I was being released. I didn't feel I didn't feel rehabilitated. I didn't have any resources. I just had these certificates and this resume, but the resume is really blank because I haven't been working, been locked up. I'm prepared to speak in an interview, but I'm not getting the interviews. So I came home September 6th. I went to my father's house, and that was an issue within itself because you can't have felonies in the household, so it can't be two felons in the household. And then the neighborhood that I'm from born and raised in Durham, so the neighborhood that I'm from is a high-profile neighborhood. So it definitely makes it harder when they're saying you can't go to this place or that place because of your address. So I'm putting in job applications all around Durham. I'm going to different schools, going to these free courses that Durham Tech has, just trying to pull in some resources so I can get ahead. At the same time, once you get out, you gotta pay your restitution, you gotta pay your probation fines, and I couldn't afford it. So I went back to doing what I know how to do and what was an easy resource for me. My grandma calls me one day, and this is my father's mama, so I don't hear from her much, and she can't even pronounce my name right. So that's how, I don't hear from her. And so she was like, "Baby, I want you to go to school." I'm like, "Grandma, I already tried to go to school. They ain't gonna let me in these people's schools." She's like, "Baby, just go up there." So I borrow a car, and I pull up at Durham Tech, and I see my homeboy out there, and his background is similar to mine, if not larger. He had a book bag on. And I asked him, plug me in. Let me get in here. And he took me to a lady. Her name was Candace Rashada Mujahid. And she's a continuing education coordinator at Durham Tech. So I sit down with Candace, and I'm just trying to explain to her very fast, like, look, I'm an ex-felon. I just came home from prison. I'm trying to get in school. I'm trying to do anything, just trying to do something productive. And she straightened me. She was like, "You're not an ex-felon. You're not nothing that you just titled yourself as. You don't accept that. And whatever you want to do, you should do. Don't just do anything." So I felt very accepted with Candace. And that conversation moved into an invitation to a meeting that was happening in East Durham, where I'm from. And I go into this meeting, and there's nobody from my community in this meeting, but everybody in this meeting is talking about my community. So I attended. I didn't really speak too much besides letting them know that I stay up the street. And inside this meeting was a brother named Daryl Atkinson. And there was a woman named Mama Nia from Spirit House. And right now, these are my sheroes and heroes. So Daryl says, you working? I want to talk to you. I want to build with you. Can you help me bring people out to a clean slate clinic? And he explains to me that a clinic is where they expunge criminal backgrounds for free. So I can bring some people to that. And I started working with Dad for free. He'll come to the neighborhood, and he understood what I was going through. He understood that I also had to feed myself. And there was a mutual respect. And then Daryl tells me that he's also formerly incarcerated, and that he's also served about the same amount of time that I did for nonviolent drug crime. and how he came home and he practiced law in 2 states, in Minnesota and North Carolina, and he got to work. And he's talking to me the same way I talk to my homeboys. And I felt very comfortable. I felt very accepted. So I said, yeah, I'm going to help you fill up these clinics for free. I didn't ask him for $1, and he didn't offer one. And we started doing this work. As I'm doing this work, I'm still continuing to have to do what I got to do. And eventually I end up going to some racial equity trainings, and I'm starting to show up at Spirit House a whole lot more. And this transition is happening with me where, like, people are being more aware than I am about my own trauma and things that I've been through. And it was just a different feeling in my life. It's a feeling I never had before. I've never had this feeling with a guidance counselor. I never had this feeling with my case managers. You know, it was a feeling that I can't really explain, but I still had that feeling today. So a year goes by, I go through some tragedies, end up being wrong place, wrong time, and I still suffer a lot. Caught some more charges, ended up being hurt, ended up in the hospital. And when I was getting my leg back together where I can walk, I decided to hit Daryl up again. And the feeling of not being thrown away for your mistakes, right? The feeling of saying, brother, I've been waiting for you to call me, man. Come up to the office, come see me. And walk into a contracting position to be an organizer. Long story short is what saved my life. I finally had a job, livable wage, and I wasn't being looked at as the sum of my worst mistakes. My mother was able to not worry, so she'll pick up the phone at night now. And as all of this transition is happening, the community where I'm from is even being supportive. So when it's getting dark, getting late, they telling me, like, go ahead, bro, catch you in the morning. We got some work to do tomorrow. And they were keeping me safe. So because of that, I'm still able to be the same person and be true to the work. I'm still in the same community. The conversation has now changed. What was the part 2 to this?
No, don't. I think part 1 was so great that, and some of you arrived after Umar sat down, so you don't know that on the back of his shirt, it reads, "We are not the sum of our worst mistake," and it's a quote from Daryl Atkinson. So he's walking around with a quote from one of his heroes on his back, and I actually think that story answered the second question, which is what are the kinds of things, what is the scope of the problem? And I think you answered that, and it actually very nicely, I think, moves over to what Umar said. After 5.5 years, he didn't feel prepared, he didn't feel ready, he had a hole in his resume. And I think Jim Coleman could talk to us about, what's your experience, what do you know about some of our clients who get out? And not to suggest it's different in kind, it's not, but now we're talking about people who are wrongfully convicted and they get out with holes in their resumes. So why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't think it's different at all.
No.
I think once you've been convicted and sent to prison, the prison doesn't treat some group of inmates as potentially innocent and others as guilty. As far as the prisons are concerned, everybody there is guilty. And so the experience that our clients have is exactly the same experience. And how well they are able to do when they get out, once they're exonerated, is a function of the skills that they had when they went in. Those who had lived and worked and had an education to some degree, who had learned how to take care of themselves in the real world, that is outside of prison, come out, and I think they have a much better chance of being successful. Those who go in when they're young and inexperienced, without skills or education, come out exactly the same way, And for them, it's like they've just been taken away for some number of years. In the case of our clients, somewhere between 12 and 25 years or whatever. And they've just been dumped in these prisons, waiting for something to happen. I was talking recently with one of our more successful exonerees, Lamont Armstrong, who went in having graduated from college. I worked as a professional, and so when he came out, in prison, he tried to continue to find constructive things that he could do, and was able to do that as a counselor, so that when he got out, he was able to pick up and sort of then adjust. Even with Lamont, though, he had to adjust to being free after having been in prison for so long. But one of the things that he told me recently was that when he was in prison, he wanted to take a computer science course because he thought that would be something good to know when he got out. And he said that the woman responsible for the program sort of laughed at him and said, you're in for your natural life. You don't need to know anything about computers. That is the attitude that basically these people have been taken off the street, and the only thing that the prison does for them, for the most part, is to try to keep them out of trouble until either they serve their sentence or they die. So we have clients who come out who have never had a serious job, who have no money, who have no idea of how to apply for employment, are frustrated easily, and it is very difficult for them to make that transition without enormous help, and we're not in a position to help them with that. It has to happen in their communities, with their families. The problem with that is that their families have also been separated from them for years, and it becomes a very frustrating experience to all of a sudden have this adult back, a person they knew years ago but no longer know. And that's kind of the bleak picture that our clients face when they get out of prison. They get out, they're very excited, they're very hopeful, they have dreams, and then they run into the reality of having been in prison. And as I said at the start, it doesn't matter that they were innocent. As far as anybody is concerned, they were in prison, and they're ex-convicts, and they're trying to find a way to make that transition.
And if I could add, take moderator's prerogative and add something. Some of us have been to Polk Correctional. We tour Polk Correctional. I don't know if you went there when you were there. So I think Lamont Armstrong's story is a little bit different. But Lamont Armstrong's story, who's been to Polk? I know, yeah. So Lamont Armstrong, there are more people who just have been, we go every year. But Mr. Armstrong's story is a little different because he was in his late 30s when he went in. And he carried with him his resume into prison. So he became a GED teacher, a GRE teacher. And he was fortunate to be at different institutions where it was, I would call them, if prison can be considered kind, they were kinder, more respectful institutions. When you tour Polk, you realize, and a lot of the young men there are there, so it's for 18 to 25-year-olds, I think, and it just, even though they talk about the programs they have, it very much feels like a holding place. Some of the men they go through very quickly and get sent elsewhere, but oftentimes they just stay there, and it's not very, again, respectful. It doesn't, it does seem to view each person as the sum of his worst mistake and not differently. And so I do think that, we're part of the program, and we're already running out of time, but part of the program, part of the question we're going to ask is, well, what can we do? And one thing we can do is insist that our prisons do more to help Armstrongs and the Lamonts and the Umars and the Theresas and the people who are coming out, because there is actually a prevailing belief, and it's not actually policy, I don't think, that people who are in for life, and they often come out, but that they can't take courses to make the transition easier. So, but I want to turn to Umar, who's our community organizer, and tell us what are some, if you can give us a description of some of the specific programs you're working on to make that transition easier for folks.
Yeah, so I don't really do programs.
In the box.
Right, well, yeah, campaign, but
We had a long talk about one that I think is...
Ban the Box is a campaign initiative where we're asking employers to remove the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony and misdemeanor off of the application? Not to not do the criminal background check, but to delay the criminal background check until a conditional offer of employment. We understand that you don't want the Hamburglar working at McDonald's, right? So like, we don't understand why certain people with certain charges can't work at a place that their charge really has no impact on the job. And that's what that creates. It's also very important that it's understood that Ban the Box came from a community of people that were directly impacted. And it was a conversation of what would even the board for us to feel like we can get employed. And out of that, that's why I take so much pride in like authentic voices, because that climbed all the way up to a national campaign, and it made it all the way to the executive branch, to hearing President Obama talk about fair chance hiring. So, yeah. So
you can tell he's the community organizer. I'm not. Program, campaign, I don't know the difference, so I apologize for that. We're supposed to stop between 1 and 1:05 with our panel, but so I'm going to skip a couple of questions, but I want to move to this one, and I'm going to ask Jim Coleman. This is a respecting people's voting preferences. This is a different time for us right now, people who care about fair chance employment and prison conditions and Black Lives Matter. So I'm wondering, what particular challenges do you see ahead of us in the criminal justice world, both, the whole, Umar, I don't know if you heard him, but he just went, So, that's his commentary. So, Jim, we'll start with Jim Coleman. Take it whatever way you want to.
Well, I'm not sure that the election of Donald Trump is going to make things any worse than they've been. I don't think he has any interest in reform of the criminal justice system, but I think there are a lot of people before him who had no interest in the reform of criminal justice system. There's a lot of talk that's going on now among a lot of different groups, conservative groups, progressive groups, about doing something about mass incarceration, doing something to reform the criminal justice system. But we'll see if those efforts continue. But I think the problem that we make often is that we don't make the same demands of our friends that we make of people we view as opponents. It seems to me in North Carolina, we had an attorney general who was in office for, 16 years, 12 years, and I can't honestly think of a single thing that he did to improve the criminal justice system, and now he's governor. So, we've got to hold everybody accountable. We've got to demand of all of the public officials that they address these problems. If we don't do that, I don't think Donald Trump is going to make any difference one way or the other. The problems are much bigger than that, and they are as much on the local level as they are on the national level.
If you're a follower of Reverend Barber, the head of the North Carolina NAACP, he has a new video in which he says, don't be petitioning the federal government. You start with your state legislatures. That's where he points to some of the efforts being made to tighten things up against the interests some of us care about. And he said they started at state legislatures because that's where you can get things done. So that's where we need to start. But do you want to add anything to that, Umar?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like communities of color, impacted communities, targeted communities, we've been surviving. So, like, Trump ain't gonna make too much of a difference in my vision, my eyes, and my peers. We done survived a lot. So it's kind of like, who is Trump? We've been dealing with Reagan, Bush's, and we've been surviving to the best we can. I do feel like we're in a new time now. When I think about like leaders of our days, and I think that these leaders were sprouted out of times when communities of color were like just down and out, and they was willing to listen to anybody for a solution, no matter how radical or how political that solution was. I feel like we're approaching those times again. Yeah.
I was waiting for the next sentence, but we'll hold off on that. So in the last, before we go to their questions, I think, and one of them will ask this question, so I'll ask it ahead, is what can they do as students at this grade? Not all of you are students, so there's some members of the community I see, but as students of this great institution, and as graduates, they'll soon be lawyers, and as community members, and you're a student and a community member, what can they do to help the campaigns or the initiatives or just ameliorate the problems?
So, on a local level, Duke impacts our whole city of Durham. We would love for Duke to ban the box, and I believe that collectively your voices in here can lean on the structures of Duke, calling out white supremacy, pointing out structural institutional racism, encouraging Duke to ban the box, knowing that that will also set the bar in Durham for other employers, because Duke run it in Durham. Also, support your local communities out here. You all are very close to the West End, where they're going through a lot of gentrification, and they're pushing black businesses out. I would love to see your voices out there, in your bodies, your presence. We organize on a regional level, so like we really like focus on the South, but being that Durham is my home, is my city, I have so much love for Durham. I believe that there's a lot of privilege in this room, and you can also use that privilege to push some of these initiatives on the grassroots level. Local campaigns, ban the box, private employers, grassroots organizations like Southern Coalition for Social Justice, All of Us in None, North Carolina, Spirit House. Big up these organizations. These are the people that's on the ground. They don't get paid very much, if any, to help save their community. And I believe that the wide range of faces in here, it looks different to Durham in a city council meeting to see you all are supporting local community. And I don't believe in reform. In the spirit being, like, I don't do Black History Month stuff, but in the spirit right now that I'm here, I don't want you all to leave thinking that, like, I believe in reform. I don't believe in prison, period. I believe in restorative justice. Didn't get nothing good out of prison. Prison definitely pushed me back on the block to have to get a bigger pack because I wasted so much time in prison. I feel like it's white walls and black faces. I feel like the roof looks like the top of a coffin. Their food is disgusting. I don't feel like we were supposed to be eating it. Their policies I don't feel like there's nothing don't think that I'm saying let's reform prison. I'm saying do away with it. Find other alternatives such as restorative justice to work it out in the community. It's a big vision. I understand it's far-fetched. People do need timeouts. I understand, but I don't feel like it's happening in North Carolina, in U.S. prisons. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think that, I think as students and as representatives of Duke, you guys have enormous power. You just have to use it. I mean, I didn't know that Duke had not banned the box. It seems to me that's a good place to start.